We're going to get into our Southwest cuisine this week. I'm really excited. This is definitely one of my favorite genres of flavors. I grew up on a lot of Southwestern food. My family is from New Mexico and Colorado. So a lot of green chilies, a lot of black beans, a lot of blue corn, a lot of spice and flavor and seasonal produce. So that's kind of the general idea, but you can mix and match, you can play with flavors, and you definitely can adjust the spice level. That's what's most important here. When you go to Chipotle or, I mean, I'm not going to call anybody out. I'm sure their food is great, but like it's kind of a one-stop shop. You can't ask them to re-season the beans or change how much lime is in the guacamole. It sort of is what it is, and that's fine. But when you get to make it for yourself, it's the way you want it exactly, and it's usually a little bit better for us, just as a side note. So we have a few things that we're going to do in class today. I sent out the ingredient list with a little blurb about what the menu is. We aren't going to have time to do every single thing. There's chopping lettuce. Whatever lettuce you guys got, just make sure that you wash it really well and dry it. Maybe wrap it with some paper towels and then put it away in your fridge in a nice reusable bag or something, and you've got salad all week. Chopped lettuce, as long as you dry it before you put it in the fridge, it's going to last for at least 4 days. And so you've got salad ready to go. You don't have to come home and mess around with chopping lettuce. But make sure that you're washing it and drying it. That's just the key. If you put it away while it's wet, it's going to definitely not last all week. If you don't wash it, it's not good for you. So make sure that you're doing those things first. And then that's just general part of meal prep. Really great. We're adding in some cabbages this week. If you've got any color cabbage, if you got it pre-shredded in a bag, if you got Napa cabbage or Savoy cabbage, like a totally different kind of cabbage, it doesn't matter. Cabbage is good for us. Cabbage is flavorful. It's going to add a lot of crunch and a lot of texture and a lot of color to the food that we're making this week. So whether you just throw it into your salads, whether you saute it up with some of your chicken and beans that you're going to reheat later on and put all that in a whole wheat tortilla, a lot of things that you can do, having it pre-shredded, having it ready to go. So those bags are really great because they're pre-shredded. The issue is sometimes they've been sitting somewhere for a long time already, which means they're going to last maybe a couple of days in your fridge once you open them. But if you shred a whole cabbage yourself, it's cheaper and it lasts a little bit longer because you just cut it. It hasn't been sitting in a bag somewhere already cut for a long time, if that makes sense. Plus, cabbage is one of the most affordable things that you can add into your diet to add a lot of good nutrition, but also like the green cabbage I got, I think was 79 cents and the red cabbage was 99 cents for the whole head. And it's going to be a ton of ingredient, ton of material to use all week long. So
cabbage is one of those cruciferous vegetables that seems to be associated with reduced risk of cancers. So that's pretty awesome. It's also high in fiber. So it feeds our microbiome. It's high in vitamin C, vitamin K. So lots of good properties.
That's awesome. I'm Irish also, so I know my people have survived on cabbage for a very long time. It grows really, really well in really unforgiving conditions. So that's one of the reasons why it does well in Ireland. Same with potatoes. So we are going to go through what we have. I already have my chicken marinated here. You can see I just literally made the marinade in a bowl and then tossed my chicken into it. I did that about 20 minutes ago. It just helps it to absorb a little bit more flavor. If you do it overnight, that's fantastic. Because it has lime juice, it can actually kind of start to toughen up the muscle fibers in the chicken. So you don't want to do it more than just like one night. You don't want to have it sitting in acid for a really long time. It'll actually start to cook it and toughen it up. So it's not that much acid that if you did it overnight, it would be okay, but not like a 24-hour marinade or anything like that. You could even just do it like right now and then sear it. It's still going to have plenty of flavor. That's why it's pretty forgiving. This marinade is flavorful as it is. So even if it doesn't soak in for very long, you're okay. So we're going to sear and bake our chicken. It's pretty easy. We just want to sear one side and then get it into the oven. So I've got my oven at 350. And I am using a oven safe pan, which means no plastic. So I can just sear and go right into the oven. It makes it easier, less dishes to do, fewer dishes to wash. And yeah, if you just, this is one thing I'm a bit snobby about. Like pots and pans with plastic on them are almost pointless because of that. Like you can't really get them too hot. Sometimes they melt even just on your fire burner. Like you want to be really careful about buying things with plastic when you're going to be incorporating high heat. So always try to make sure that your pans, if you're buying new pans for yourself in the future, keep it in mind. All metal is always better. So I'm heating mine at a medium heat. I'm going to make sure that my pan gets hot first, and then I'm going to add in a little tiny touch of just olive oil and canola oil blend. You can use just olive oil, you can use just canola oil. Just a little bit. That's about a tablespoon. I think depending on how much chicken you're using, how good your nonstick pan is if you're using nonstick, all of those things change, I guess, how much oil. Just try to make sure that you're using a really healthy oil. We talked about these before. If you're new in class, I know Amy has a lot more information about that, some of the best oils that we can use.
Yeah, so both the olive and canola oil are high in monounsaturated fats. So that's a great choice. And if you're not wanting any flavor imparted, then I would go with more of the canola, especially like if you're baking or something like that. But usually in regular entrees, I'll use olive oil, mostly.
So I got my pan hot first. I added the oil. I let that get a little bit warm, and then I added my chicken. And I put it what would have been skin side down. Even though we're using skinless chicken, that's your presentation side. So you always try to sear presentation side down. It's still on about a medium. I'm going to go to about a medium low now, just because it's the pan is pretty hot. These electric burners really work. So it sometimes takes a little bit more adjusting of your heat. If that's what you have at home, then you probably are more of an expert than I am. But they take some playing around with, but it's a lot of, they really get hot fast and they really hold their heat. So for a lot of different kind of cooking, they're really wonderful. It's just about 4 minutes on one side. We're trying to get a really good, nice sear. Trying to caramelize any of the sugars that exist in the protein and in the marinade ingredients that we made. Even though we didn't add any sugar, there's sort of always natural properties that are going to caramelize. And so we want to let that happen. And then we're going to flip it over and throw it into the oven. If we sear it for a really long time on the other side, it would probably get overdone because it's going to be on that side while it cooks in the oven. So it's going to keep searing while the rest of it bakes. So I'm doing 350, but I've got a pretty high convection oven, so that might actually run it up to about 375. Keep it around that though, 350 to 375. If you take it to 400, it will cook faster, but it's going to dry it out. So you want to maintain that nice juicy interior, especially if you marinated it for a good amount of time. And to do that, we just sort of let it bake a little bit more naturally slowly. So 350 is a pretty good temperature. It still will only take about 12 to 15 minutes to finish it. Searing it on one side helps give it that head start, gives it a lot more flavor. And then it's gonna just finish cooking through while we move on to other things. That's one of my favorite parts about planning your meal prep. Sometimes I cook my chicken entirely on the stovetop. But I've got two other things that I want to do on the stovetop here. We need to saute our vegetables for our black bean salad, and we need to stir our rice. So I want to just put the chicken away and not be worrying about if I'm overcooking it or when do I need to take the lid off or any of those other kinds of things. So I got it up to a good hard sear on one side. You can see that, some good caramelization around the edges where it was really sitting on the surface. I tend to leave sometimes the tiny bits of fat that are still attached onto a chicken breast because it's the smallest amount and it adds a little bit of flavor. It renders out when you cook it, and so it's usually left in the pan, and the chicken that you eat is still extremely lean. But if you want to just clean those little bits off before you sear it, perfectly fine. Lots of people do that. Not going to hurt it. So I've got a little splatter here. That's okay. I'm going to put this in my oven. What I love about an all metal pan.
Yeah, chicken is very lean, especially like the chicken breast, only about 3 grams of fat in a portion and 1 gram of saturated fat. So about a third of what you might find in like a dark meat chicken.
Really big difference, yeah.
Also a really great source of protein. So about 20 grams of protein in 3 ounces.
I know that I made a note on the shopping list. If you're gonna make any substitutions with this, you can absolutely do that. My favorite substitution for this would be cauliflower. I think that cauliflower takes to these spices and these flavors so well, and then it roasts up at a really high heat and gets really good and roasty and that kind of savory charred flavor. It goes a long way to replacing like that umami from animal protein that we're used to getting. I think cauliflower is a lovely blank canvas, but if you wanted to, there's also firm tofu. It would go great. You would do the same thing, sear it, and then bake it for about 5 minutes just to kind of firm it all up and dry the interior out. You go and chop it up. You've got a lot of really good stuff to use throughout the week for that. So.
And a different nutrient profile for sure, right? So if you choose cauliflower, it's going to be lower in calories, but it's also not going to have much in the way of protein. Whereas the tofu, it's going to be a rich source of soy protein.
Right. So I would say if you're going to go for the cauliflower this week, then you like double up on your black bean portion, and it's probably going to help, right, Amy?
Yeah, yep. Or you could choose quinoa as a grain to add some protein.
I always forget that there are grains of protein. So great, so helpful. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to heat my new pan back up. No matter what it is I'm sauteing, I'm always going to follow that ridiculously silly ha-ha method, right? If you haven't heard me say that before, it's now going to be stuck in your head forever. You want to ha-ha your pan, so that means heat, then add, then heat, then add. So we're going to heat the pan, let it get warm, then we're going to add the oil, let that get warm, then we're going to add our food. So you're going to ha-ha the situation. I'm going to use maybe about 2 teaspoons, a teaspoon of oil here. I don't want a ton of liquid into this black bean salad, just enough to kind of coat the veggies and get them breaking down. But we don't want our salad to be swimming in oil. Sorry, the machine, if you have one of these or have never dealt with one of these before, they only work, or they want to work, when they're making contact with the actual metal. It's a magnetic process. So when you put the pan back on, it stops yelling at you. So that's what the beeping is. All right, I got in here my chopped red onions, bell pepper. I'm using a lot of jalapeno. I think we've talked about this before, how much I like spicy things. I've got my cumin, chili powder, garlic, salt, and pepper. So everything in that black bean salad, we are going to saute together all of our veggies and our spices. And so what that's called is blooming. It's a fun, pretty name for it. When you cook your spices into your food without a lot of liquid, you're blooming the spices. So these spices have been dried for a very long time, and by blooming them in oil over heat, you're making them more alive and more fragrant. So it really goes to imparting even more flavor to our super healthy food. So all of that good stuff is going to go into my pan now that I've let it ha-ha. Now I'm going to do the last add. I'm adding in my food. And I'm going to let this saute just for a few minutes. I've got it again on that sort of medium heat, medium to medium high. I probably am going to turn it down to closer to right around medium so that I get everything broken down and tenderized, but not browning or blackening. I don't really want to add too much color. I'm just trying to really like tenderize it and get all that flavor cooked in together. So I'm going to stir it up just to get it kind of there in one little layer. And then I'm going to leave it. This is hard for me and people. You don't want to stir it the whole time because we want to let that caramelization happen. And that only happens if you just kind of leave it alone. It won't take long. We're just going to leave it there for maybe a minute and then stir it up some more.
This choice of vegetables are high in vitamin C. So the onions, the jalapenos, the peppers, right? They're all really great sources of vitamin C.
Awesome. And if you're like me and you have slight sinus problems, the spiciness really helps. Just clears me up in the morning. All right. So after you've let it sit there for a little, just a little, to kind of let all of that start to cook on each side, give it a little stir. You practice your flipping. If you haven't seen me do a demo, there is a video actually on our website in our quick tips section on how you can flip a pan. But just to show you, since you're watching, don't try it your first time with hot food. Try it your first time with a cold pan and some dry rice. You know, because if you can always vacuum that up or something, but it's not going to hurt you if you spill it. But you're just gently going to shake it. You want to get the food close to the tip of the pan. And all you're doing is flicking your wrist forward and then backward, catching the food. It's just a really quick flick. And as you do that, the food kind of jumps up the pan. I make it look easy. Thank you. Thank you. I've been doing this for 16 years. You, with just a couple of rounds of practice, will be able to do that. It's actually, it's actually kind of a natural thing. You're just like moving it forward and backward, forward and backward. That's just a little side tip, and you can practice that, like I said, with a cold pan and like some cold beans or cold rice, and then you can just get your flip going and get good at it. It's a lot of fun. Okay, that's it. I want to make sure that they're all broken down. I've got really good like translucent onions. Everything is sauteed to the point where if I bite into it, it's not going to taste raw, but it's still got some crunch. Okay, that's what you're going for. You want to taste it for seasoning because it has all of that spice and salt on it. So if you need to adjust it, you can at this point. But this is the real easy part of this recipe. You're going to add in, I'm using thawed frozen corn because I had a bag in the freezer, but right now is corn season. It's going to be going on for another couple of months probably, and it is outstanding. So getting fresh corn is thumbs up right now because it is actually in season. I've got my corn, I've got my can of low sodium black beans, which I have rinsed under cold water until the water runs clear. At that point, they're good to go. Using fresh black beans is awesome. If you cook black beans from scratch, you can cook them with flavor. So you can throw like jalapeno and limes and onions and whole garlic and bay leaves and all kinds of goodness right into the pot so that your black beans are so much more than just plain black beans. But it does take about 4 to 6 hours depending on how you cook them. And so it's not in everybody's wheelhouse to do that or schedule, and that's understandable. So if you're going to get canned, just try to look for those low sodium ones. It makes a big difference. Right, Amy?
Yep. And it's a great way to add protein to meals quickly, right? You can just open a can, rinse it well, throw it on some salad, throw it in a bowl, put it in your wraps. You can even make brownies with black beans.
Yes, you can. They're really, really good because black beans are super creamy and they don't taste like Munchwoods. They absorb all that other flavor. I've had a black bean and beet sugar chocolate cake, and I couldn't have told you that either of those things were in the chocolate cake. It was very, very good. So you put in your nice sauteed hot veggies, stir it up with your plain black beans and your corn. Taste it for seasoning, adjust as needed, and you've got a really delicious, pretty easy side dish. It just goes on everything, especially in that wrap or, you know, with fantastic flavor on top of the salad. Fantastic. I love this on baked potatoes. Just pile it up with more protein and veggies, and that's my whole dinner. Just a baked potato with a ton of this stuff and some hot sauce. Really, really good. Think a little bit outside of the box. It doesn't always have to be a burrito or a salad. You can put all of that stuff on a like a whole wheat or a plant-based pasta even, and make like a Southwest pasta salad. Take that for lunch during the day. Fantastic. So lots of different ways you can use these different things. I'll post a couple pictures through the week as usual, like how I'm using some of this stuff. I do eat a lot of burritos though, I'm not gonna lie. So this is one of my favorite things, to just put it all together and go to town.
I think, yeah, I have a big bowl of that in your fridge. You could, for a quick lunch, you could microwave a sweet potato, put some of that inside. Yum.
So good, yeah. All right, so the last like major thing I want to demonstrate is the rice. This is, I think, a really flavorful version of a traditional dish that I'm sure Someone else's mother or grandmother makes 10 times better than this. I'm not claiming that this is by any means the best that I've even had. Oh, there was a woman who grew up down the street from me. She would come by 3 times a year or so with the biggest batch of rice and a huge pot of tamales, and it was, I'll never eat rice as good as that rice because it's just sort of that nostalgia. And I understand you, I'm sure a lot of you have had better rice, but I think this is really good and it's super quick, and that's why I like it. You can use even those like microwave pouches of rice because you want to have your rice ready to go. So, or you make your big batch of rice on Sunday, and then this is one of the really great ways you can use it because you can throw this together in about 15 minutes rather than like 45 minutes waiting for the rice to cook every single time you want to use it. Make a really good batch or get the quick cooking microwave time, because then you're inspired to use it more. And this is one of my favorite ways to use it. So I just wanted to impart it to you, and then you can adjust it. Use different tomatoes, use different peppers, use more spice, less spice, play with your seasoning. You know, you guys are becoming better and better cooks every week. That's the whole point. So we are going to be sauteing again. You want to get your pan warm, and then we're going to add in our oil, and then we're going to add in our stuff, just like normal. So I'm going to get all of my ingredients over here. I have my chopped onion, chopped very small. I've got a lime for juicing. Got some of that roasted chopped tomato, measured out, ready to go. Any diced tomato, you can use regular whole tomatoes and just dice them up. You can roast your own tomatoes right on the flame. Yeah, I'm gonna turn that off just for a second. So I can tell you this. This is one of the reasons I really love gas burners over electrical burners. And so if you're ever in a point in your life where you can afford a new oven or construction on a kitchen, like gas is better. It heats more consistently. It's actually more affordable. And you can char your peppers and your tomatoes, or you can like warm your tortilla right on the flame. You can, all of these things you cannot do with an electrical stove. It's frustrating for me because a lot of these things are my favorite things to cook. So if you like any of those, if you want to learn how to roast bell peppers right on the flame, and that, you can't do that. You just can't do that with one of these. So that is one of the downfalls. If you ever encounter that choice in your life, Chef Julia recommends choose gas. You can always
love gas.
Yeah, right?
I grew up with electric, and the first time I used a gas stove, it was a bit frightening. But now I would not go back.
No. Okay, I'm going to show you here. I don't know if you'll be able to perceive this in the camera as well, but when I push down, there's still a lot of give. It's pretty rubbery. Not ready yet. Just another few minutes, but we want that touch to be firm and not like push in. You want it to kind of hold your finger and bounce right back to your touch. So that's one of the first things I'm looking for on a thick piece of chicken to make sure it's ready to pull out. And then of course I am still going to cut into it and make sure it's not pink at all. At all. Okay, our last cooking demo here. We are going to saute up all of the flavor. That's the whole point of having the rice already made. So that at this point, it should take about 5 minutes and then another 5 to heat it through, and you're done. So the first thing that we want to saute, I believe, is the onions, but always double check your recipe and make sure. Yeah, gonna warm the oil, add the onions, cook until tender. I've cut my onions very small. I personally don't like to eat rice and like bite into a giant chunk of onion. It's sort of very childish, but I never grew out of those things. So for me, I know how I like to eat them. I chop them very, very small, and they cook out really well, so that when I'm eating my rice, it's more about flavor, less about chunks of onion, right? You can differentiate all of those things based on how much you like onion, or if you've got kids in the house that maybe like me, refuse to eat them if they can see them, but don't mind the flavor. My poor mother, that was definitely me when I was a kid. I used to pick them out of the salsa, like, and now I just swim in them. I love them. But I do want them chopped up really, really small. So I've got my nice chopped onions. I warmed the pan, warmed the olive oil. I can always tell that the oil is warm enough because it's starting to pull away from the center. It's starting to kind of pool around the sides of the pan. It's warm, so I can add in my onions. If you don't get a sizzle when you first add in something that you're supposed to be sauteing, you haven't hot your pan correctly. I can't not laugh when I say that. So, gonna get these coated in oil. I'm going to keep mine at a medium heat. I don't mind a little bit of color or caramelization. It's going to be really good flavor, but I don't want them to overcook. I don't want them to break down or get black. They're very small, so I need to be careful that they don't burn. And so to do that, I am going to kind of pay a little bit more attention to them. They're really breaking down already. If you want to let this happen slowly, you can turn it down to like a medium low. And then it'll take about 5 to 8 minutes, depending again on how big you cut your onion. I'm going to go kind of quicker because I want us to move through this, but what you're going for is maybe a little bit of browning. It's starting to pick up a little bit of like a honey color from the pan. But mostly we're looking for translucency. So like the red onion has started to turn very pale pink or pale purplish. It's starting to look more and more translucent. And that is what we're going for. That tells me that they are cooked through into the middle of that little bit of onion. So that's it. So now I want to add in all my spice. We're going to bloom some flavor again. We want to get that kind of fragrant and hot before we add in our tomato stuff. Once we add in our tomato, there's going to be a lot of water that we're going to try to help cook out so that it condenses all of the flavor. But if we put the spices in after that, then the spices would just dissolve into the water and it would be flavorful, but not nearly as flavorful as it would be if we add it in now. Let it get hot and then we add in our liquid. So I've got my sauce from the adobo, the adobo sauce from the chipotle, my chili powder, cumin, garlic powder, and paprika, I think is the other one. If you don't have smoked paprika, that's okay. You can use regular paprika. The smoky flavor is pretty traditional in this kind of Spanish rice mix, but it's not absolutely necessary. You get a lot of smokiness from the chipotle sauce too. So it's okay if you don't have smoked paprika. I know that that's sort of like don't go buy a whole jar of spice just for one thing if you don't use it for anything else. So I'm gonna mix these up. I'm gonna let it bloom. We're gonna get this warm to the point where then I am gonna add in my hand roasted tomatoes and my tomato paste. Tomato paste is it's hard to replace. You can make your own, but it takes a long time, and it's pretty affordable. Those little cans are not so much money. You never use the whole can though, right? So then you're left with like, what do I do with a half a can of tomato paste? It's great in a lot of different meat marinades. It's great to make your own tomato sauce. Add in that tomato paste. It adds in a really, really deep tomato flavor and it thickens it up. Whenever I do like meatloaf, I use tomato paste in the glaze. You can really, a lot of tomato glazes for fish would use tomato paste. So if you have that can and you haven't used it all for a certain recipe, don't just let it go bad in your fridge. Look something up online, like how can I use leftover tomato paste? There's lots of recipes, lots of ideas. And then I say, even if you don't need like the spaghetti sauce or something that week, freeze it. Those things freeze really, really well. Actually, you can even freeze the tomato paste. You just put it in a little container, make sure that it's airtight, take it out of the can. Don't ever store anything in a can in your fridge. And it'll keep in the freezer. You just have to thaw it out really well before you go to use it. But yeah, you can even freeze it. So if you don't want to make something out of it that week, you can go ahead and do that. I know you're always left with like half a can of tomato paste and what now?
That's how I am too with the adobo and the Chipotles and adobo. So yeah, but you can mix it into barbecues and mayonnaise. You can have
Yes.
it with your eggs or mix it with a little maple syrup and use it as a glaze. So yeah, I love the idea of just looking up like some ideas. What can I do with this leftover ingredient I have?
Yeah, tomato paste is one of the most condensed natural flavors. It's got a good amount of the natural sugars from the tomato, so it cooks even more of a deep flavor. If ever I'm making short ribs or any kind of like long, slow cooked beef, which I do maybe once a year, tomato paste goes a really long way to giving it a lot of depth and savory flavor. Makes sauces really rich, even if it's not only tomato. I use it in Indian cooking, you know, it helps flavor a lot of the curries and tomato-based sauces. So it's a lot of things you can use it for.
We do have a question about replacing tomato paste with El Pato sauce, which I'm not familiar with.
Avocado is, well, it's usually an enchilada sauce, but they also just have tomato sauce, and it's phenomenal. So if you're making enchiladas and you don't want to make your own enchilada sauce, El Pato is the brand to buy. There are other brands of enchilada sauce, but none of them are nearly as delicious as the El Pato brand. And they have regular tomato sauce. They have like tomato puree, and I think it is a lot more condensed in flavor than a lot of the other tomato sauce brands. And so that's not a bad idea. It's a pretty good replacement in terms of the flavor. I have never used an El Pato sauce that is thick like tomato paste is, but I'm sure there is one, or you just cook it out, you know, because it's really good flavor, yeah. But I always keep a can of it in my pantry for enchiladas. So I'm gonna cook this out. You can see that it's pretty thick. There's not a lot of like water dripping down. We want that. If your canned tomatoes are really watery, then you can let this cook for a couple of minutes, long enough for some of that water to evaporate and steam off, and then you're left with this really nice flavorful tomato pasty product, which we are going to add in our rice and bring it up to heat. Let it all cook together, making sure that the rice gets really well coated and hot throughout. You don't want to eat like cold, hard rice. That's not fun. So I'm just making sure that this gets broken down. Sometimes little lumps, that's okay. Then stir it up.
One of the things I love about kind of meal planning in advance is, say that you're going to have this Spanish rice one night, but you make a big batch of brown rice. You know, you could use it for a curry dish later in the week because, you know, you can make the rice, and as Julia did, it's not mixed together yet, right? So you could save half of it for a curry, and you can use half of it for this or a stir fry. And so kind of planning in advance, then you know, like, okay, like how many times this week are we going to have brown rice? How much should I make in one sitting so that I don't have to get out my pan and cook rice three nights this week?
Yep. And I love that you mentioned curries. I want to mention, I know that a lot of people have questions about this kind of thing. These kinds of Southwestern Latino flavors, a lot of the spices that we're using today, and a lot of the flavors we're using, lime, tomato, chili powder, cumin, they all go also really well with Thai food and Indian food. So both of those different cultures of food, whether you're looking at like sort of slightly Americanized generic versions of them, those ingredients kind of go across the board in a lot of those cuisines. So you wouldn't be using them exactly the same way, and you might not use the exact same blend of chili powder and cumin, but having it in your pantry and then going, what else can I make this week so I'm not just eating Spanish rice every single day? A lot of these ingredients cross over really well into Thai food and Indian food. And so those curries, a lot of the same spices and flavor, add in a can of coconut milk, and you've got a whole new flavor profile and like world that you're traveling to in your plate, you know, but
throw in some chickpeas maybe instead of the black beans, right? Like, yeah, easy switches.
really easy switches that are really classic. We've been using a lot of these similar ingredients. Every once in a while there's something that's really different, but a lot of these things are going to work in your pantry for all of the different weeks that we have been covering. You know, having a good foundation of these generic spices and flavors is going to make.
And onions and garlic are probably in just about everything you make, I think.
Everything. They are the mother like flavors for me and for most cuisines around the world. They are the foundation of flavor when it comes to a lot of cooking. So this is basically finished. All I was doing at this point was making sure that the rice is hot all the way through. I'm going to finish it with a good hearty squeeze of lime juice. This lime is very juicy. I'm getting about a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half out of the half of a lime. So I'm just going to finish it by squeezing it right over the top. I want the juice to get in there while it's still hot. It's going to help it actually absorb the flavor more, not just sit on the outside. And then that's it. I'm going to turn this off. Stir it up one last time. But that's the other thing. This surface stays hot for about 3 more minutes at least. So I can turn it off now, but it's going to keep cooking. So that's why if you have one of these burners, you need to be very aware. Once it is done, you have to remove it, or it will continue to cook your food and then burn your food, and then you will be very sad like me. So if it's going to keep cooking, you want to make sure that you remove your pan, because then you're going to have mushy rice or burnt chicken or whatever it is that you're dealing with. So I'm just going to set that aside to let it cool down. I'm not eating it right now, so you want to make sure that it comes to room temperature. Any of this stuff that's hot, before you put it in your refrigerator, make sure that it comes down to room temperature at a normal pace. If your house or your apartment is too hot and it's not going to cool down fast enough and it's going to be sitting out all day long, then you can put it in a nice shallow, low container and put it uncovered in the fridge until it drops down to a safe temperature of closer to 70 degrees, and then you can wrap it up and put it away. All right. Perfect. I want to show you this, the difference. When I was poking it before, there was definite like a sink in, my fingers sunk in. There's no rubbering, no sinking here. It's firm to the touch, bounces back. So I'm going to cut into it just to make sure. Everything is so much further away in this kitchen. So I'm going to use our tongs. Even this is a little too hot for me. Cutting into the very fattest part. You can then poke inside, and it's all white, it's all stringy. It's all, cooked all the way down through. No pink meat, no muscle that looks like it wouldn't pull apart stringy. It's also going to sit in this pan now for the next 5 or 10 minutes to cool down, which actually it will continue cooking because the pan is still hot from the oven and the chicken is still hot from the oven. So it's going to have a carryover cooking time of probably 5 to 6 minutes. So we will double check it again afterwards and make sure that it still just looks perfect. But I like that it looks white through, but still nice and juicy. That's what we're going for. In the end, I'm going to slice up the chicken breast. I find that then it's just ready for more different things I might want to use it for. I'm never going to sit down and eat a whole breast. I'm always going to cut it. Even if I'm eating it like a half of the chicken breast sliced, I'm still going to slice it. So I'm going to do that in advance so that when it goes to put away, it is ready for me to use in the majority of the ways that I want to use it. It just really helps during the week to make things even easier. There's a couple things that I would like to demonstrate cutting today. Keep this towel underneath the cutting board so it doesn't slide. I know that when I'm at home, I have those good little rubber mats. So any of those tricks are really helpful for you. So your cutting board's not moving around a lot. Dangerous. So I'm going to we're gonna cut some avocado. Avocado is actually, out of all the kitchen injuries, at least this used to be, maybe the stats have changed, but this is the most common emergency room visit from a kitchen injury here in California, because we really love our avocados and people don't know how to cut them safely. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And I'm going to show you how to cut some cabbage, just because there's kind of a fun and easy way to get your own shredded cabbage, and I want to show you how easy and quick it can be, so that you can see, like, this 99% head of cabbage is going to make so much shredded cabbage that yeah, it's much more cost effective than those little bags. But no judgment if you buy the little bag, because you might not need that much cabbage, or you might just really hate cutting things, and that's okay too. I do want you to become more comfortable with the knife. It is what makes cooking more fun and more confidence boosting. I spent a lot of money to go to culinary school, and my knife skills are probably where all of the $50,000 went for a one-year program, because this is what I use every day. All of the other, like, beautiful French techniques and mother sauces and words that we can't pronounce, those are great, and I'm proud that I know how to do them, but every day I use this knife. Every single day I put my knife skills to work, so that was literally where all of that money went, and that, it's okay. We make our choices. So, cutting the avocados safely. Once you become an expert with your knife, you can, if you want to live on the wild side, do this a different way. Because there are different ways to cut an avocado, but this is the safest way. And that's why I'm going to show this to you now. It doesn't really matter if it has stickers on it. We don't eat the outside of the avocado. If you are unsure if your avocado is going to be ready, you want to look underneath the little stem. So you can pop that little stem off. Here, let me show you on here. You can pop that little stem off, even at the store. Don't be ashamed. If it feels soft enough, you know, but not like a mush avocado, that's good for slicing. But you're still like, I'm not sure if it's perfect, I don't know. This isn't foolproof, but this might help you. If you pop off the little stem and it looks like it's dark green, or brown, you're okay. If it looks bright white, it's not ready. Then your avocado's not ripe at all. So that is just kind of one way to look at it. If the stem is already popped off, or if you can just pop that off yourself. But I also can tell it's soft enough to slice and to dice up, but it's not going to be mush. So there's various levels of avocado depending on what you're using it for. Avocado is not really great to prep very far in advance unless you're making your guacamole like that day. But if you're going to be slicing avocado or dicing avocado to add to your salads or your burritos, then you want to do that a la minute. You want to do that right before you're making your stuff. It will just turn black. And it's not bad for you, it's just oxygen, but it oxidizes so quickly and so well that at the end of the day, your avocado is not going to be very appealing, not very nice to look at, not very appetizing. So you want to keep your avocado fresh right until the last minute. If they're not ripe enough, put it in a paper bag. It will help it ripen up. If they are overripe, put it in the fridge. That will stop it from ripening. First thing, this hand, our usual guide hand, which we usually put in our nice safe claw, we're not going to do that. We're going to like splay our fingers nice and wide so that we can see where they are. The most important thing to remember is to leave the avocado on the cutting board. A lot of people want to pick it up and do that in their hand. And even if you're really good at what you're doing, bad things can happen. I was already 9 years into my career. I had already cut hundreds of pounds of avocados in my lifetime. And it doesn't matter. The pit of the avocado was rotten through the middle, and my knife went through it like butter into my hand and entered in there and exited there, and I still have no feeling left in this finger. Don't be like me, kids. Leave the avocado on the cutting board because you just never know what's going to happen. Splayed hand so that you're nice and safe, fingertips away from what you're cutting, and then you're going to go into that stem. We want to go right into that stem, horizontally until we hit the pit. Once you hit the pit, stop, okay? Then I'm going to gently turn the avocado around. Let this do its work for you. Knife down, avocado open. That's the simplest way to cut it in half. You can do it on its side. It just is a little safer to be horizontal and to just kind of turn it around your knife. Obviously, in everything that we do, having a good sharp knife is helpful. If you don't, use a small paring knife and cut around that way. It's also going to be less dangerous for you. I like to pre-slice the avocado in the shell because then when you scoop it out, it's ready to go. So on the cutting board, you use the tip of your knife or a paring knife, and you just gently slice into the avocado, creating those slices ready to go. And then using your spoon, you gently scrape around the outside of the shell, scooping it all out, and you've got your nicely sliced avocado ready to use on lots of different things. If I'm going to be making guacamole, I usually pre-slice and dice it in the shell and then scoop that into a bowl and mash it up. This is where people tend to hurt themselves. Like me, almost lost a finger. Don't hold this in your hand while you're trying to get the pit out, especially if you're trying to get the pit out with your knife. Bad things happen. So the safest way to get the pit out is with your fingers. A lot of the time you can just kind of get one fingernail into it and pop it out. If you can't do that, mine's coming out, but if you can't do that, you can use a spoon and just pop it out using your spoon. This is how I almost lost a finger. Don't do it this way. Use the very tip of your knife into the pit, and then it pops it out. See, it didn't even pop it out because the inside is coming to pieces. Bad things can happen. So that's why we leave it on the cutting board and not in your hand, right? Try to pop it out that way. It's not going to do it because that pit is fighting. So the fastest way for this, get your fingernail into the part of the pit closest to where it attaches and pull it out that way. You're not going to cut yourself with your own fingernail, okay? That's the safest way to do that. If it's really, really, really firmly in there and it's not coming out no matter what, your avocado's not right. Like that's just also another sign. It should come out easily enough that if you're fighting it and you're going to hurt yourself, it's not ready, and put it back in the brown paper bag. So I like to do this, like I said, pre-slice or dice. Being very careful of where my fingertips are, trying not to cut through the skin, but if I do, where is it going to go? On the cutting board, not in my hand. So that is the safe way to cut an avocado. It's really important, as no matter what you're doing, to just always know where your fingertips are. Always keep the avocado on the cutting board, okay? If you want these avocados to last for maybe an hour without turning completely brown, sprinkle them with the citrus juice, like lemon juice or lime juice, and it will stop the oxidizing process, at least for a time frame where you can eat them today without them looking really gross. But you want to do this basically as you're sitting down to your salad. This is the last thing that you do, or your wrap, or your burrito, or I like to just eat it as a plate, you know, your rice on the side. That's always a great way to start the week out, and then play with your different variations on the theme as you go along. So that is avocado. Really, please let those words sink in. Leave it on the cutting board, okay? And then
I think of you every time I cut one. I think of Julia, especially when I'm taking out the pit.
Good. If you remember one thing from all of the things that I have tried to teach everybody, that is probably the most important. That makes me feel good because I literally can't feel this finger anymore, you guys, and I don't want that to happen to you, okay? So I'm glad that this sticks. That makes me feel good, Amy, thank you. Cabbage, okay, this couldn't be any easier. Could this be any easier? Wow. Chandler Bing coming out. So I'm going to cut it in half. That's the easiest way to start. Leaving it on the root, it's usually a flat side. So you try to find that flat side no matter what it is that you're cutting. And then I'm gonna go in half, get my tip of the knife onto the board, and then down. That's always how I try to cut anything. Get the knife tip down first, and then guillotine your knife. So this core, this stem is horrible. I mean, it's not edible. You can't eat. Yeah, no. So you have to cut it all the way out. Even these like super thick leaves that connect to the stem can be extremely bitter and tough. But you just need to make sure that you cut them small enough. So to cut the core out, I'm actually going to cut this whole thing again in half. So I'm left with quarters, flat side down. And then you literally can just cut around that. So I want you to be able to see this. What's a good angle here? You just cut around that. See how I just like cut that triangle off? Just cut it at an angle so that you're cutting that thick root off, the stem off, and you're left with just cabbage. But like I said, these thick pieces can be pretty tough. So you want to shred your cabbage nice and fine. So to do that, all we're going to do is shave with our knife down the edge of the cabbage, because as you can see, it has all these beautiful layers in it already. It has already done the work for us. Nature is so kind. So you're just going to shave it very thin down one side, creating your nice thin shredded lettuce. So I'm going to put this actually here, I think. Maybe you can see a little bit better at this angle. Maybe even like that. Yes. Okay. You've got all those layers, you just kind of want to shave down the side. So you're just going to start with your fingers in the claw, knuckles back, thin shave down one side. If you have a mandolin, you can definitely use your mandolin. It works really well to get nice thin shaves. Flip it over, get your nice flat side. Always try to keep a flat side on the bottom. It is much easier to get a thin cut if you can keep the tip of your knife on the board, because then you can just go down in a very, very thin, paper thin shave. Okay, and you can go across as well to make short shredded cabbage. If you're like making tacos, like little corn tortilla tacos, and you don't want real long stringy cabbage, you can also cut it across the long way. So we have that quarter piece. Instead of cutting it this way, you can cut it across the short way, and you still are taking advantage of all those wonderful layers that already exist in the cabbage. And so what you're left with is perfectly shredded, easy to use, ready to mix into our salad cabbage. If there's any really thick pieces like that, I recommend taking them out. It's just not pleasant to bite into unless you really love bitter cabbage, and then go to town. So that's it. That's sort of like the trick. I know it looks really self-explanatory, but if you haven't done that, I remember when I first learned that decades ago, I was like, oh, look at that. It's just like in the bags, like it's just shredded perfectly. Just one slice all the way across, either long way or short way, and oh man, it's all those beautiful layers that exist. It's just like the onion. We let the onion do a lot of work for us by being nice and layered up, right? So, just got a few more minutes left. There wasn't anything else like specific that I wanted to demonstrate. The salad dressing is really self-explanatory. The recipe, not to toot my own horn, is phenomenal. So if you make the full batch, it makes a lot. But then it lasts for, I mean, I've had a batch in my fridge for a couple weeks and it's still really good. You just shake it up, let it come to room temperature so that the oil, the fat in it is not like solidified and cold. And then it lasts a really long time, and it's a phenomenal flavor, mixed in with all of the greens and the cabbage and the rice and the bean salad and some chopped chicken. It's, oh, I don't know how to describe it. It's like the perfect interior of a burrito on a salad. So I hope you like that. I hope you make the dressing. Again, it's one of the perfect ones. I just make it in a container, shake it up, keep it in the fridge, so it's not a whole lot of extra dishes or extra ingredient. It's basically like a combination of all of the other things that we've already used here today, with honey as your sweetening agent, because most vinaigrettes want to have a little bit of sweet in it. So this is actually a dressing that is a mimic on the dressing from Chipotle, the restaurant. Somebody brought a sample of the dressing and said, can you make that? And this is what I have come up with. And I am told it's quite accurate. I know. So if you like those kinds of like fast food options or like ready to go convenient restaurant options, you can make it for yourself just as easily. You can play with the spices. You can definitely reduce the salt, and it is still just as good as it would be if you go to the place. And this way, when you do your prep in advance, you come home and 15 minutes later, you've got a really amazing variety of meal to put together. So
you can save a lot of money that way too.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and it's not just like every restaurant, I'm not going to call them out by name, all of them upcharge, because that's how they have to support their employees, their insurance costs, their overhead for the facility that they're paying for. They have huge rent in Los Angeles, don't get me started. So you're not paying for the food. You're paying for eating out and supporting a restaurant, and that's wonderful. I am the first to tell you that, I'm in support of that. All my friends still need you to keep eating at those restaurants, but every day is not great for us, and every day is not great for our wallets. And when you can make food that's just as good or maybe even better because it's the way you want it to taste, then it goes a long way to just kind of reducing a lot of health issues, a lot of money issues, and you can still go out and treat yourself to something really nice or fast or easy sometimes, but boy, if you eat this every day during the week at work instead of going out to get a salad bar or a burrito bar or a to-go sandwich or any of those kinds of things, like sandwiches are $16 now. What? I could make like 50 sandwiches for $16. So think about those things when you are treating yourself to food, because the money is there to support the restaurant, and that is wonderful. And so choose the right restaurants, choose the right people to support, choose the right, what you're gonna, when I eat out, I get the like most annoying thing on the menu because I don't want to make that, like eggs Benedict. Let someone else make a hollandaise sauce from scratch. Let someone else clean up the mess of poached eggs. But when you're just making like fried eggs and toast, I want you to have those skills because they're very cost effective, and yeah, they make you feel good. They make you feel good to take care of yourself. At least for me, it goes a really long way. So, French cooking is intimidating. Well, I know. It really, really is, and it really can be, but I want to tell you from absolute personal experience, I started very young. Julia Child's Introduction to French Cooking, Volume 1. I just opened it up to her mother sauces section and I started. And so if you start small, just make a sauce, make one of the mother sauces, because then your mother sauce you can turn into all of your daughter sauces. So if you make an aioli, which is an egg yolk baked sauce, right? Then that's hollandaise, that's mayo, that's you learn a mother sauce, just one mother sauce, and let Julia teach it to you because she actually does teach it very well. And then from there, French cooking is no longer quite as scary. They're just very particular and they like their rules. And so they write it in a way that kind of makes you think like, wow, this is too much, but it's not. It's just, honestly, when I first started cooking French food from really, really intimidated French cookbooks, I read it in a hilarious French accent, not to insult anybody, but because it makes me like calm down. It just makes me kind of enjoy the process. It just is like, they're not any better than you. They've just been doing it longer. That's it. So I know it's intimidating, but I don't want you to not try. So definitely try one of those French things. But this stuff is hopefully not as intimidating, hopefully easy, hopefully exciting to you. And I hope that you try it all. Let us know how it turns out as usual. Amy, if there's anything else you wanted to point out about this week?
I don't think so. I think there's a lot of things to choose from and to combine, and even like we mentioned, even with some different cuisines, you can pull in a lot of these ingredients.
Yes. And so if that's you're wondering halfway through the week, what do I do with these chipotles, this tomato paste, these spices, you can reach out, absolutely reach out. I can help try to point you in the direction of helpful recipes, but that's also, the internet is a fabulous place if you let yourself go down the rabbit hole of recipes and food sites. Look at reviews, look at how often people make them. Don't just read the never-ending blogs. That's a whole nother thing. But you know, all I do sometimes is type into the search bar recipes using chipotle and black beans, and you have a whole world of things to choose from. So try that. Don't let your food go to waste. Experiment, have fun, and just enjoy cooking and enjoy your meal prep.
There's a question about the name of your knife.
This knife that I use for demonstrations is from Smart and Final. It is by First Street Brand, which is the Smart and Final store brand. This costs $19. It is versatile, it is durable, it's a good utility knife. It sharpens very well and maintains its edge pretty well. And I just like it because when I'm like kind of hacking into vegetables, I'm not worried about the cost of the knife. I have a knife that I use for myself, different kind of from my past career as a catering chef and a private chef. It's maybe $180. It's Miyabi, M-I-Y-A-B-I, I think. Miyabi is a wonderful brand of knives, still in this sort of mid-shelf range of affordability, not very expensive, but really, really beautifully handcrafted Japanese knives. And the difference is, well, why this is $20 and that one is $180 and why it's worth that much more is because the blade on this knife stops right about here in this handle. It has a little nub of metal that they glue inside this handle, and it's not very durable. It's not really very strong. If this were to break, it could break, right? It's just less, it's a weaker blade because of that. My Japanese knife, the blade runs all the way through the handle to the very end. It's called a full-time knife. So the knife blade is actually as long as the whole handle is, and that makes it much stronger. It's a better metal that they use, and it's just going to last a lot longer. But really, that $20 knife from Smart and Final is great. It works really wonderfully well. I'm not going to try to convince you to spend a lot more money than you have to.